What's up, y'all? You're watching Union Minded. I am your host, Eric, and today we are going to discuss some labor history. Why? Because yesterday, the whole nation had Labor Day here in America, and we celebrated on the first Monday of September. But why? In fact, why is Labor Day even important? Well, we got to go back in time, over 100 years back in time, all the way back to the events that led up to the Haymarket Affair, to find out just why Labor Day is such an important day for workers in this country and why it's celebrated in September as opposed to in May like the rest of the world. There are very important reasons for this, and the owners of industry are part and parcel as to why we do not celebrate it in May and rather we celebrate it in September. Let's dive in. This is according to the Illinois Labor History Society, and I'm going to put the link in the description box for you guys. The Haymarket Affair. To understand what happened at Haymarket, it is necessary to go back to the summer of 1884, when the Federation of Organized Trades and Labor Unions, the predecessor of the American Federation of Labor, called for May 1st, 1886 to be the beginning of a nationwide movement for the 8-hour day. This wasn't a particularly radical idea, since both Illinois workers and federal employees were supposed to have been covered by an 8-hour day law since 1867. Pause. In 1886, they were calling for it. In 1867, the law was already in place. It just wasn't being enforced. That's how much power business has had in this country from its inception. Let's continue. The problem was that the federal government failed to enforce its own law, and in Illinois, employers forced workers to sign waivers of the law as a condition of employment. With 2 years to plan, the organized labor movement in Chicago and throughout Illinois sent out questionnaires to employers to see how they felt about shorter hours and other issues, including child labor. Songs were written like the 8-hour day. Everywhere, slogans were heard like 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will, or shortening the hours, increase the pay. Two organizers of these demonstrations were Lucy and Albert Parsons. Lucy had been born a slave in Texas in about 1853. Her heritage was African American, Native American, and Mexican. She worked for the Freedmen's Bureau after the Civil War. After her marriage to Albert, they moved to Chicago, where she turned her attention to writing and organizing women sewing workers. Albert was a printer, a member of the Knights of Labor, editor of the labor paper The Alarm, and one of the founders of the Chicago Trades and Labor Assembly. On Sunday, May 2nd, Albert went to Ohio to organize rallies there, while Lucy and others staged another peaceful march of 35,000 workers. But on Monday, May 3rd, the peaceful scene turned violent when the Chicago police attacked and killed picketing workers at the McCormick Reaper plant in Western and Blue Island Avenues. This attack by police provoked a protest meeting which was planned for Haymarket Square on the evening of Tuesday, May 4th. Very few textbooks provide a thorough explanation of the events that led to Haymarket, nor do they mention that the pro-labor mayor of Chicago, Carter Harrison, gave permission for the meeting. Most speakers failed to appear. Instead of starting at 7:30, the meeting was delayed for about an hour. Instead of the expected 20,000 people, fewer than 2,500 attended. Two substitute speakers ran over to the Haymarket Square at the last minute. They had been attending a meeting of sewing workers organized by Lucy Parsons and her fellow labor organizer, Lizzie Holmes of Geneva, Illinois. These last-minute speakers were Albert Parsons, just returned from Ohio, and Samuel Fielding, an English-born Methodist lay preacher who worked in the labor movement. The Haymarket meeting was almost over, and only about 200 people remained when they were attacked by 176 policemen carrying Winchester repeater rifles. Fielding was speaking. Even Lucy and Albert Parsons had left because it was beginning to rain. Then someone unknown to this day threw the first dynamite bomb ever used in peacetime history in the United States. The police panicked, and in the darkness, many shot at their own men. Eventually, 7 policemen died. only one directly accountable to the bomb. 4 workers were also killed, but few textbooks bother to mention them. The next day, martial law was declared, not just in Chicago, but throughout the nation. Anti-labor governments around the world used the Chicago incident to crush local union movements. In Chicago, labor leaders were rounded up. Houses were entered without search warrants, and union newspapers were closed down. Eventually, 8 men representing a cross-section of the labor movement were selected to be tried. Among them were Fielden, Parsons, and a young carpenter named Louis Ling, who was accused of throwing the bomb. Ling had witnesses to prove he was over a mile away at the time. The 2-month-long trial ranks as one of the most notorious in American history. The Chicago Tribune even offered to pay money to the jury if it found the 8 men guilty. Can you imagine that? They offered to pay money to the jury to find these folks guilty. On August 20th, 1886, the jury reported its verdict of guilty with the death penalty by hanging for 7 of the Haymarket 8 and 15 years of hard labor for Neeb. On November 10th, the day before the execution, Samuel Gompers came from Washington to appeal to Governor Oglesby for the last time. The national and worldwide pressure did finally force the governor to change the sentences of Samuel Fielden and Michael Schwab for imprisonment for life, although 5 of the 8 were still to be hanged the next day. On the morning of November 10th, Louis Ling was found in his cell, his head half blown away by a dynamite cap. The entire event was most mysterious since Ling was hoping to receive a pardon that very day. Adolph Fisher, George Engel, Albert Parsons, and August Spies were hanged on November 11, 1887. In June of 1893, Governor J.P. Altgeld pardoned the 3 men still alive and condemned the entire judicial system that had allowed this injustice. The real issues of the Haymarket Affair were freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to free assembly, the right to a fair trial by a jury of one's peers, and the right of workers to organize and fight for things like the 8-hour day. While textbooks tell about the bomb, they fail to mention the reason for the meeting or what happened afterwards. Some books even fail to mention the fact that many of those who were tried were not even at the Haymarket meeting, but were arrested simply because they were union organizers. Sadly, these rights have been abridged many times in American history. During the civil rights marches of the 60s, the anti-Vietnam War demonstrations, and the 68 Democratic National Convention, we saw very similar violations to our constitutional rights. The Haymarket Affair took on worldwide dimension in July 1889 when a delegate from the American Federation of Labor recommended at a labor conference in Paris that May 1st be set aside as International Labor Day in memory of the Haymarket martyrs and the injustice of the Haymarket Affair. Today, in almost every major industrial nation, May Day is Labor Day. Even Great Britain and Israel have passed legislation in recent years declaring this date a national holiday. For years, half of the American labor movement observed May 1st as Labor Day, while the other half observed the first Monday in September. After the Russian Revolution, the May 1st date was mistakenly associated with communism, and in a protest against the Soviet policy, May 1st was proclaimed Law Day in the 1960s. That's atrocious. The year 1986 marked the centennial of the 8-hour day movement and the Haymarket Affair. Folk singer Pete Seeger and a group called The People Yes, named after Sandburg's volume of poems by that name, planned a nationwide celebration. This event offered teachers a unique opportunity to teach the facts about Haymarket and to correct the distortions and inaccuracies in our textbooks. This was written by William J. Adelman. The Haymarket Affair is what propelled us to the 8-hour day and what propelled us to get our weekends off, and is the reason that May Day, May 1st, is the International Workers' Labor Day. Here in America, we do it on the first Monday of September, and that's because the business interests did not want workers associating Labor Day with Haymarket and with the solidarity that came along with that movement. Now, here are 10 fascinating facts about the Labor Day holiday. The first Monday in September is celebrated nationally as Labor Day. So how did we get the holiday and why is it no one is sure who created it? First, the idea first became public in 1882. In September of 1882, the unions of New York City decided to have a parade to celebrate their members being in unions and to show support for all unions. At least 20,000 people were there, and the workers had to give up a day's pay to attend. There was also a lot of beer involved in the event. The New York Parade is number 2. The New York Parade inspired other unions. Other regions started having parades, and by 1887, Oregon, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, and Colorado made Labor Day a state holiday. So number 3, how did the Haymarket Affair influence Labor Day? On May 4th, 1886, a bomb exploded at a Union rally in Chicago's Haymarket Square, which led to the violence that killed 7 police officers and 4 others. The incident also led to May 1st being created in most nations as Workers' Day. The U.S. government chose Labor Day instead to avoid a celebration on May 1st. And New York's unions had already picked the first Monday in September for their holiday. Number 4, 2 people with similar names are credited with the first New York City event. Matthew McGuire, a machinist, and Peter McGuire, a carpenter. Number 5, Grover Cleveland helped make Labor Day a national holiday. After violence related to the Pullman Railroad strike, President Cleveland and lawmakers in Washington wanted a federal holiday to celebrate labor, and not a holiday celebrated on May 1st. Cleveland signed an act in 1894 establishing the federal holiday. Most states had already passed laws establishing Labor Day holiday by that point. Senator James Henderson Kyle of South Dakota introduced S 730 to make Labor Day a federal legal holiday on the first Monday of September. It was approved on June 28, 1894. The holiday has evolved over the years. In the late 19th century, celebrations focused on parades in urban areas. Now, the holiday is a celebration that honors organized labor with fewer parades and more activities. It also marks the perceived end of the summer season. Can you wear white after Labor Day? It's an old tradition. You're not supposed to wear white after Labor Day. This dates back to the Victorian era, where it was a fashion faux pas to wear any white clothing after the summer officially ended on Labor Day. The tradition isn't really followed anymore behind that fashion trend. White indicated you were still in vacation mode at your summer cottage. How many people are in unions today? According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there were 14.8 million union members in the workforce in 2017. There were 17.7 million in 1983. And what is the biggest union today? Apparently, it's the National Education Association, which has about 3 million people that are members. These have been little tidbits about Labor Day. I hope they were educational and informative. And I hope that it gives you appreciation for what it is that workers went through in order to allow us to have the worker lives that we have now. And there's still so much work that needs done. There's still so much to do. The labor movement needs you. And I hope to see you out there in the fight. My name's Eric. You're watching Union Minded. Let's remember, the fight is not left and right. It's up and down. And it's going to take solidarity to win always. Each one teach one. Get out there and reach one. And remember, there can be no union without you and I. Front and center. Peace.